Hey, buddy. How you doing? Good. There in sunny Southern California.
It's finally sunny again. We got a few days of rain, which is nice for us and quite different than we're used to. How about you guys? You hunkered down there? I heard it's pretty cold.
Oh, we're digging back out. Yeah, we got a little cold snap this week, but that's okay. It's okay. That's wintertime in Colorado.
There you go. There you go. Part for the course, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I'll tell you where it's not very cold is in the database server room of Wells Fargo. Well,
Yeah, apparently so.
yeah, can you go through a little bit? I didn't have a whole lot of time yesterday to do a ton of reading on it, but let's want to get started with kind of what happened yesterday. Can you break down a little bit for folks what happened and what your thoughts are on it?
Well, all I can do is share the official story. Obviously,
Yeah.
there's a lot of debate right now about whether the official story actually holds water or not. But apparently, they were remodeling one of Wells Fargo's data centers, and some dust got caught in the fire detection system, and so it set off the sprinklers, and that shut down the data center. And this took Wells Fargo offline, all of their online banking, ATM, any credit or debit card purchases were being denied, and all the systems in the branches were down. So folks, including myself, essentially had zero bank, no banking services. As of this morning, they've got most of that up, but there's still a couple accounts I'm not able to get into. And most alarmingly, this is the second time this kind of thing has happened in a week. So I was posting on LinkedIn yesterday, kind of made the point that it's really almost impossible to believe that in 2019, a company as big and well known as Wells Fargo has a single point of failure in their back end systems. And I kind of made the comparison to Bitcoin or any other blockchain. I would challenge anyone to show me any major blockchain platform that's been down for over 30 hours for the second time in a week. So it really kind of speaks, I think, to the power of decentralization.
Yeah, it's also a little scary to think about the fact that literally one bank that controls that much money and has that much influence can go down for that kind of time, and you don't have access to your capital. So what do you really own at that point? Hopefully they can. I imagine they have backups on for their backups, but it's still a little scary to think about. Sure.
Yeah, Chad, it was just really eye opening to me because I've worked with so many companies, not even 1% the size of Wells Fargo. And, having continuity and failover plans in 2019 is just standard. It's par for the course. So, kind of scary to think about a corporation of that size just keeping all their eggs in one basket. But probably a good wake up call for us all, and we should probably do a sanity check with our own organizations and make sure that we haven't made the same mistake. Data centers are pretty reliable, but they do go down from time to time. And so I think it's a good message. Everyone needs to be thinking about business continuity, failover, backup and recovery. How do we keep providing services to our customers if we have some problems on the back end?
Absolutely. And kind of in in a how do I put this in a nice way? It brings to light a lot of the problems with a centralized system, and perhaps hopefully shines a good light on possible solutions that blockchain might bring to the world. Which, if we jump into the infographic that we created, I want to go ahead and, well, if you could show that, kind of dive into this a little bit. And it's the infographic that I posted yesterday. Enterprise and corporate blockchain roadmaps, which I think Wells Fargo probably could take a look at something similar to this and find it very easy to find a pain point or identify a pain point. But want to kind of get started on this, if you don't mind, Chris, um, and go through this. This was kind of the brainchild of the discussion that we had, and I wanted to really put together a roadmap for companies. We get a lot of people and a lot of interest in our training, our workshops, and people coming to us saying, okay, where do we get started? We're not quite sure. We don't know where our organization is. We want training. Okay, well, what type of training? Do you know what your team needs? Do you know where your pain points are? Do you identify any use cases that you can relate to that might be solutions? So Chris and I worked on this. Chris probably more than I. So I appreciate your time on this, Chris. Very well thought out. But want to start to go through it a little bit. And Chris, can you touch on the first topic on this chart here? And it's pain point identification, and really kind of explain what you mean by pain point identification. And I know you have questions that each organization should ask themselves, including what and how and why. Can you go through what pain point identification is for an organization?
Yeah, absolutely, Chad. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen many organizations make over the course of my career is making a technology decision first. So deciding, hey, we're going to use blockchain, we're going to use IoT, we're going to use data and analytics. Pick your tool set, and then back into solutioning based on that technology. So, where can we use this technology in the business? And really, the right approach is to begin with a completely technology agnostic point of view, and to say, okay, as a business, what are the biggest pains that we have? What are the biggest inefficiencies? What are the biggest barriers that we have to being able to provide the level of service and quality to our customers that we want? And at first brush, it might sound pretty obvious. Why would we have a formalized step around this? Everyone in the organization is probably aware of the pains and the inefficiencies we have. But oftentimes it's the subtleties involved with the discovery behind that. Meaning that if you get 12 different stakeholders from a company into a room and you ask them, hey, do you agree maybe service delivery times are an issue, they'll all universally say, yes, this is a problem our company is having. But then you dive in a little deeper and you say, okay, well, what's the root cause of that? Why does this problem matter? What are the effects of it that concern you the most? And you're likely to get 12 different answers. So really, it's not just identification. It's also getting all of your stakeholders on the same page and agreeing that we're all talking about the same problem. We view it the same way. Because if I go out and I address a problem and I create a solution that's perfect for marketing, but it's not perfect for finance or IT or accounting or any of the other organizations in a business, well, then we haven't really done any good. So that's where the process all starts is let's just come together. Let's have a very honest discussion about what's not working well. Let's hear that story from everybody's point of view, and let's collectively agree on what the problems are we want to try and address.
Awesome. And who do you think in an organization should lead this or take this lead to kind of put this together? And then second part of the question, what can an organization do or what can we do to even help them? What kind of process do you think this is to get started?
Great questions. As far as audience, this kind of organizational change, because this is really what we're talking about. We're not talking about simply upgrading an existing process or putting a simple new system in place. Often these are the first steps of a dedicated effort on organizational transformation and modernization. And those are changes that really need to come from the top. So the best audience to have is going to be your senior level management, your senior non-technical business decision makers, your C-suite executives, et cetera. As far as who leads that conversation, that can certainly be done internally. And if you choose to take that approach, very often what we're talking about are operational issues. And so a COO or someone who is an expert in your business processes can be a good person to lead that. But very often, just through politics, personal history, et cetera, it's oftentimes more productive to have an outsider come in and lead those discussions because that outsider is going to be completely new to your business. They're not going to understand what you do, your processes. They're not going to take anything for granted. And that process of you actually explaining in great detail these processes that you're concerned about to an outsider oftentimes highlights gaps in your knowledge. I see this all the time, personally when I teach. There's just no more humbling experience than teaching. You think you know everything about a subject, you're an expert, you can answer any questions, and then you sit down and you try and explain it all to someone else, and you realize, oh, there's some pretty big gaps in my knowledge. I'm maybe not as knowledgeable as I thought. So bringing in an outsider can oftentimes be a very eye-opening experience for these organizations.
Absolutely. I think we're experiencing some of those things internally here at Blockchain Training Lines as well. We just hired Megan, who is our partner manager and handling a lot of international partners. And she's brought a really fresh perspective to it because she's new. She's not involved in the day-to-day like a lot of us have been at Blockchain Training Alliance. So she's brought to light a lot of new points that we kind of took for granted because we're so deep in our entrenched in our business that sometimes it's hard to step out as an outsider and look in. So I absolutely can agree with sometimes a fresh perspective or an outside perspective is refreshing and makes you look at things a little differently. Good. Sorry.
I was wandering a little off topic, not to brag or anything, but it's Megan's second week, and she is just absolutely tearing it up. So I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to point out just what an amazing addition she's been to the team and how thankful we are to have her.
Absolutely. Couldn't be more appreciative and more excited about having somebody like that on our team, and just our entire team of Blockchain Sharing Alliance has been extremely fortunate to have some awesome team members. That's for sure. End plug there. Okay. So wanted to get into the next step. So now that we've identified, or the organization has identified some pain points and acknowledges the fact that there might be a blockchain solution or a blockchain roadmap for them, what do they do next? And I imagine on this chart here we put together, they should explore some use cases. And Chris, I know you've had some experience with this. So can you go through some use case exploration? And once they have 50 use cases and they realize that this is an amazing technology, how do they then start to prioritize those use cases?
Absolutely. So, really where that phase starts with is in the previous phase, we identified the most painful areas of your business. What are the things, if you could wave a magic wand and change, what would be some of the first things that you would use that magic to address? So in the second phase, we're coming back and we are looking at the most painful of those pain points. And we're just taking a very quick thumbs up, thumbs down. Is this a technology problem, or is this a problem where technology can assist? Oftentimes these pain points, many of them can be addressed by a simple change in process, change in communication structure, et cetera. And they're not necessarily technology problems, still worth solving. That in and of itself is a valuable step because a lot of organizations will go out and spend a lot of money trying to throw technology at a non-technology problem. So once we've kind of got those two groups created, we focus on the second one. Here are all the pain points where technology might be able to assist. And then we ask our stakeholders to prioritize those. What we're really looking for is the top 2 to 3, maybe 4. But at this point, we're not trying to boil the ocean. We're just trying to take baby steps. So everything we identified, what are the most painful of these pain points in the might be addressed by technology bucket. And then let's start talking about some use cases for those. And let's come to agreement at the end of our session, half day, 1 day session, about what those top 2 to 3, again, sometimes 4 use cases look like, that we want to start sketching out high-level designs for. And not to spoil the ending, look surprised when we get there, but where all this is eventually driving to is we want to be able to gather enough requirements, not to build a full-blown solution, not to put anything into production, but just to build a simple proof of concept that we can use to try and tell a story or convey an idea and show the business what might be possible. So that's really what we're doing in that use case phase, is we're just trying to understand and prioritize those use cases before we start gathering some more detailed requirements.
Awesome. And then once you start to put that together and you end up with this really exciting list of use case exploration or even paths that you'd like to explore to start down the path of a proof of concept. How do you recommend narrowing in on something, or should you narrow in on one, multiple use cases, perhaps?
It's a great question. I think that has to do with a couple things. The size and the technological maturity of your organization have a lot to do with that. So for small to mid-size organizations, or organizations who have not extensily created their own custom technical solutions before, it's probably better just to stick with 1 or 2, because we'll be teaching all the participants along the way how to go through solutioning, design, and then rapid iteration of POCs. So at that point, it's the learning process for those individuals is just as important, if not more important, than the actual problem we're trying to solve. And we just don't want to overload them. Walk before you run. If you come from a larger organization, you have more IT resources at your disposal. Perhaps your organization has extensive experience creating custom solutions. Well, then they probably already understand that methodology, and there isn't that learning curve. And they're probably big enough that we can spin up multiple teams and have them running in concert with each other. That being said, all of these use cases and proof of concepts that we generate from them are likely going to come back to one stakeholder audience. And so we also have to be cognizant of not overloading that stakeholder audience. How many POCs can they review in an afternoon? So, really we try and cap it at 2 or 3, but I have seen larger organizations go a bit bigger than that with success. But it's much better to start small and take that crawl, walk, run approach.
Chris, have you had any experience with that at any, without naming any organizations that we've been working with, but perhaps an airline company where they got into this this use case exploration and came up with 20 great ideas, and now they've kind of narrowed that down. What's been your experience with that, and how did that go? Was that enjoyable? How long did that last?
For me, this type of thing is incredibly enjoyable. I don't know that I can always say the same thing about the folks on the other side of the table. No, but in all seriousness, it's a very enjoyable process for me. That's just a subjective opinion, but I love this kind of work because I'm just fascinated in learning how all these different businesses and verticals and different industries work. So it's kind of a neat chance for me to peel back in the layers and get a little bit more insider view than the public usually sees. I think what's really fun for me personally too is just seeing how excited and enthusiastic a lot of the stakeholders get. Oftentimes just even in that first phase, just getting a group of senior leadership, senior decision makers together and getting them to a point where they all agree on the problem definition and what the most pressing problems are. Oftentimes in many organizations, as crazy as it sounds, that's the biggest barrier is just taking that initial step. So it's very fun for me, and I think valuable for our stakeholders, because right in that first phase, we're able to walk away and go, wow, we're really making progress. I can see the beginnings of this transformation. We've tried this internally for so long and it just hasn't gone anywhere. And now it finally feels like there's some momentum behind this change that we want to enable. So I think we've seen some great success. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun going back and plugging into those companies later on and seeing how those ideas have blossomed and led to new ideas. And it's really enjoyable for me personally because a lot of what we're doing is going out there and teaching organizations how to fish. So it's nice when you can come back and see that they've mastered those skills and they're now completely self-sufficient in that regard.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's very cool. We're starting to create some great relationships out there with companies that we start to run trainings with, and then we come back to them a few months later and run another training and see their progression and how excited they still are about the technology and how much progress they've made. So,
yeah, since we're speaking about a certain airline we're not naming, who may or may not be Air France, really great organization. One of the things I was really impressed with working through this process with them is their very first project when they jumped into blockchain and started going through all this wasn't to address a real business problem. They said, it's important that we learn the process before we start to use it to address the problems that we know we have. So our very first proof of concept, our very first walk through all of this is going to be to create a fun internal application. They created a blockchain app where all of their employees could go and place wagers on their favorite football teams. And of course, this is over in Europe where they're crazy. They play football with their feet, not with their hands. I don't know what that's about. And then whoever made the most successful predictions at the end of the season, they won an iPad. That was the big giveaway. And I just thought that was a really neat place to start, because if you pick something completely arbitrary and non-related to your company for that first go through, you remove any personal politics, sense of ownership. Nobody feels like anybody's stepping on anybody else's turf. And it really gets the team to focus more on learning the methodology than some of those external concerns. And so I always brag about them and the approach they took, and I recommend that to any other organization thinking about this kind of change enablement and transformation.
That's incredible. That's an incredible way of going about it. I didn't know they were actually doing all that internally, but it's very exciting, and it's a really cool perspective. I think oftentimes we're trying so hard to roll something out to the general public, and there's gonna be things that go wrong with just about everything that we roll out, and it's not always fun to learn about it from your customers. So to kind of beta things internally, that's a really cool methodology. So now that they've kind of gone through what the problems are, what their pain points are, done some use case exploration, prioritization. The next step we have in this phase, in this roadmap here, is solution architecting. Can you go through what solution architecting is and what these next steps are for an organization that has identified use cases and now wants to take the next step?
Absolutely. So at this point, it is typical to see the audience shift, although that's not a requirement. What we really need in the audience at this point are subject matter experts around the processes that we've identified. So oftentimes, just that information about the process can come from someone a little bit lower down in the organization. In fact, they usually have a much more detailed and granular view of that process than the executives sometimes do. So we typically engage with that audience, and our very first activity is for each use case to start with defining our guiding principles. And this helps address, I think, one of the most common reasons for failure in these types of projects, which is you set out to solve problem A, and by the time you look up, you've solved problem B, and problem A hasn't been addressed. Things like scope creep, change management, et cetera, can all kind of cause a team to lose focus along the way. So we start off by defining the guiding principles for our solution. What are the overarching principles that we want to embrace in this solution? And that really becomes the North Star for our project. And then at every level of requirements gathering and implementation along the way, as a team, we're asking ourselves, hey, this decision that we made, this feature that we designed, this thing that we implemented, does this all align to our guiding principle decisions? And these are just very simple either or questions. There really is no right answer. The right answer depends on your organization. I'll give you one quick example. Feature heavy versus feature light. So what kind of solution do we want to build? How do we deliver the most value to the end user? Is that by being real feature heavy and building something like Adobe Photoshop or Microsoft Excel, where we try to cram as much into one application as we can? Or are we building something like the Google search engine interface, where it's just a logo, a text box, and a button? Both are valid approaches, but you need to understand which one fits your organization and your particular use case up front. Then from there, we go into defining personas and user stories, which are just fancy ways of saying, tell me about what the current state is, and then tell me a story about the idealized future state. So if we could just wave a magic wand and will the perfect solution into existence, what would it look like? Tell me a story about people using that solution. And from that, we can extract functional requirements. What are all the things the solution needs to do? And that's really as far as we need to go with that audience. Once we get to that functional requirement level, we've really got a level of detail sufficient for our dev teams to come in and to start building out proof of concepts.
Absolutely. So by the end of the solution architecture phase, they should be able to, an organization should be able to have a high level architecture and begin the actual development phase and proof of concept phase.
Yes, absolutely. Now, the point I always remind folks of is when we're talking about building a proof of concept, I love the analogy that we're just building a movie set. So you think about an Old West movie. Um, if you want to film an Old West movie, you want to remake Deadwood or something like that, you don't actually go out into the Old West and rebuild an entire town as it would have existed. You build everything on a soundstage. You don't have real buildings, you just have facades that are propped up. You don't actually build the saloon, you just set that up on a stage. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with our proof of concepts. We're not trying to build the whole town. We're not trying to build the full solution. We're just trying to build enough to tell a compelling and engaging story to that senior level, non-technical decision maker audience. Just enough to convey to them, hey, if we wanted to actually turn this into a real solution, here's what it might look like. And that's another area I see a lot of organizations go wrong, especially when you get your dev teams involved, because developers, and I say this with love because I come from this background, have a very natural tendency to want to build full, complete, perfect things. And so it goes just very much against our gut instinct to go, no, just stub in a bunch of functions and, we can just pretend this transaction went through. We're really just trying to tell a story to the end user.
Awesome. So once you realize that you're just trying to tell that story and you don't need to build out the entire set, but you do have to have some basic functions. So can you walk us through a little bit of the network architecting phase and kind of the things that are needed to actually look at? So you don't have to create the entire town, but you do have to stand up the facade a little bit and the buildings and what is required for the network architecting phase?
To extend the analogy a little bit further, if the POC is just us building something on that sound stage so we can tell a story, network architecture is about how do we build that sound stage? How do we create that environment where we can stand up that set to tell the story? And this usually happens in conjunction with development. So we get through with requirements gathering. We have enough to get our developers started. And in unison with that, we also start building out a network infrastructure. And the idea here is when our developers are done building out a proof of concept, for many reasons, it does not make sense to have your stakeholders test that proof of concept in developer environments. They're inaccessible. They're constantly in flux. They can be very confusing and overwhelming for a non-technical audience. So what we're really looking for is just a place to be able to deploy our solutions so we can put them in the hands of our stakeholders and collect feedback. So this could be a separate dedicated testing environment. This could be something that you stand up on premises. This could be something that you choose to outsource as a service offering and let someone like Microsoft or Amazon or IBM worry about it. But really what we're looking for is just to stand up enough infrastructure to be able to support these proof of concepts. And if we already know at this point that some technologies are going to be a very good fit, and we most likely want to move beyond proof of concept to MVP, minimum viable product, or to an actual production release, then we're going to need that infrastructure in place anyway. So now's a very good time to get started building that
out. Awesome. So that kind of leads us to our final step, and you've gone through a little bit of it already. But getting to that proof of concept, what does this look like for an organization at the end of the proof of concept? What should their goals be to accomplish? And how do they go about getting to that final step? And then once they're to that final step, what is the next step? Full production? What are the final steps for an organization, Chris?
Yeah, so when we get to the last step on this diagram, at least, it is not so much a single step as it is just a series of iterations until you get to a point where you've told a compelling enough story to get buy-in from your stakeholders. stakeholders. So you can kind of think of this as, if you read the back of the shampoo bottle, the famous rinse and repeat. So we're going to rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat over and over again. What we're trying to do in this phase is we're going to deliver version 1 of our proof of concepts. And it's not so important what we deliver, just that we get something into the hands of our stakeholders. Because what you'll find as you go through this process is human beings are remarkably bad at communicating what they want. But we are remarkably good at telling people what we don't want or what we don't like. So it's very important to get something. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Get something into the hands of your stakeholders with the goal that you want to come away with a laundry list of everything they didn't like. We then want to go through short iterations, ideally a week, 2 weeks at the most. I don't like having development sprints take longer than 2 weeks because it's very easy for your development team to go dark, for requirements to start drifting between your technical and non-technical audiences. Changes don't get captured properly, etc. But really, we're just taking some of that feedback, and then we're sitting down with that senior level audience, and we're saying, okay, here's all the feedback we heard. We as a development team have gone through an assigned level of effort to address each of these issues you defined. I'm just making up numbers here. Based on everything you told us you didn't like, we think it's about 3 weeks of work to address those. And so what we need you to do is just pick off a week's worth of tasks, and we'll attack that in the next sprint. And we'll keep going through this, with everybody in agreement that we're just building a proof of concept. We're just trying to tell a compelling story. Once we get to that point, we kind of extend beyond what's on this chart, and we start talking about, okay, how do we take this proof of concept that tells this story and turn it into an MVP, what we call a minimum viable product, or a solution that contains the bare minimum feature set that we would want to release to our end users. What does that look like? What do we need to add? So now we're actually saying, hey, I like this Old West story. I like Deadwood. This looks like a cool Old West town. Let's actually start to build it. So what buildings do we want to build first? Do we build the stable first, or the saloon first, or the hotel first? And what buildings do we need to have in this town before we actually invite people to come move into it? We got to have a post office and a general store. The stable maybe can wait for a few months.
Absolutely. I think that's a pretty clear. I like the Old West town analogy there. So to put you on the spot a little bit, Chris, you've gone through this whole roadmap now. Can you give me a brief 1 to 2 minute kind of quick overview of the 5 steps you've laid out here, and kind of the path an organization should take, and like a 1 to 2 minute brief overview, kind of touching on the 5 points, and just give a run through. If you're an organization that wants to get started, and you're at the very beginning of this, kind of give me like a brief run through of the 5 points you've made here, and where organizations might get started.
Yeah, so if you're looking at this going, hey, I want to jump in, all this sounds good. The first step is just decide where in those 4 steps do you fall. Have you guys already aligned senior leadership wise on what those business pain points are and why they matter? If so, then maybe it makes sense to start gathering requirements. If not, that's a very, very good place to start. And often if the initiative goes no further than just that first step, it's still very valuable because it's gained alignment among your top level stakeholders. And it potentially has uncovered some business pain points not everyone is aware of. From there, we jump into solutioning. We gather some requirements. All we're trying to do at this point is really tell the story about, hey, what are our guiding principles? What absolutely has to be true about this solution? And what does the current state look like? What does the future state look like? Essentially, at every one of these levels of detail, we're attempting to answer 2 different questions with more and more detailed answers. The first is what? So what is the problem we're trying to address? And the second, and perhaps more importantly, is so what? Okay, we're trying to address this problem. Why does this matter? If we fix this, what's the expected benefit or outcome? If we don't fix it, what's the expected outcome or negative implication behind that? And then the steps after that are just about, hey, let's go out and let's build this. Let's get our developers going. Let's get the operation side of the house, standing up an environment where we can host our solution. And let's get this into the hands of our users, get feedback quick, fail quick, fail early, and get to our end goal in a very iterative fashion where we're delivering something of real business value every 1 to 2 weeks.
Awesome. Thank you. That was spot on. I appreciate it. And hopefully all of our viewers appreciate it as well. I want to just, if anybody has any questions, always feel free to reach out at any time. We'd be happy to jump in and kind of take a look at your organization, or have Chris or anybody here answer any questions you have on where you might fall on this this roadmap here. So, Chris, do you have any kind of final closing points about this diagram? It's a lot to, I know it's probably a lot to take in. My best recommendation would be to always reach out, talk to somebody else that's outside of your organization, and perhaps see what they think, and let them take a look at some of the pain points. But do you have any kind of first steps you'd recommend, Chris, for somebody taking a look at this and still a little lost?
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate what you said. We're always here to help, and please feel free to reach out. We're talking about what can be a very complex process that, if we look at it soup to nuts, certainly involves more than 4 steps. So when you put together an infographic, you're really just trying to capture the highest level of detail. There's a lot of nuance that goes into this, and sometimes the devil really is in the details. And just having a 30-minute, 60-minute phone conversation oftentimes can help answer a lot of those questions, alleviate a lot of concerns and fears, and really create a much clearer vision with your stakeholder group on how to move forward and what problems to move forward on. So if you're looking at this infographic, you like the content, you think, all of this or some of this is applicable to your organization, but you're still kind of left wondering, well, okay, how do we take that first step? How do we get this ball rolling? Reach out to us. As you can tell, I really enjoy geeking out on this kind of stuff. So it's more a personal pleasure to me than anything. So absolutely, we're here to help.
All right. Well, Chris, I appreciate your time, and thank you for going through this. And again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. So, Chris, stay warm there in Denver, and be sure to be in touch soon.
Absolutely. I'll only be here in Denver for a few more days, and then I'm heading to warmer climates. So enjoy that sun out there. Glad to see you guys got the rain.
Yeah.
First week I was out there, I came direct from Dublin to our offices in Southern California. And other than different license plates on the cars and everyone driving on the other side of the road, I wasn't sure I was in a different town at all. So it's good to see you guys get the moisture out there.
Yeah, always good to have the blockchain beer guy in town. A lot gets done here, so look forward to having you out.
I'm not sure I'd go that far, but
we'll look forward to having you out again. And good luck to you, travel. I know you got a lot of travel ahead of you. And all the folks out in Dubai. I think we're going to Dubai, the Philippines, Saudi Arabia. Be on the lookout. Chris will be in town. I know when is the Future Dubai Summit? That's April.
Yeah, Future Blockchain Summit we're going to be at. So come see us there. If you're in Dubai, that's going to be April 2nd and 3rd or 3rd and 4th. Shoot, I don't have the dates in front of me. Look, what a great spokesman I am for this event.
We'll post it down below here.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll post it in the description. If you're in the Riyadh area in Saudi Arabia next week, come stop by the Saudi IoT conference. I'll be out there all week, and it's always a lot of fun meeting LinkedIn friends in person and getting to shake their hand and make that personal connection. So if you're anywhere in the area, please come say hi. I'd love to meet you in person.
Absolutely. All right, Chris. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Chad. And thanks to the team at BTA.
Yeah, have a good day.
Awesome stuff coming.
Have a good day, man. Thanks. Right. Bye.
Are you looking to become a certified blockchain solution architect, but you just can't attend one of Blockchain Training Alliance's live 3-day trainings? We have great news for you. Blockchain Solution Architect training is now available on demand. No matter where you are in the world, you can now learn on your own time, at your own pace. This self-paced course is taught by BTA's Chief Learning Officer and lead instructor, Chris Bennett.
Hello and welcome to the Blockchain Training Alliance's course on blockchain architecture. My name is Chris Bennett. I'll be your instructor. Over the coming hours, we're going to start from the very basics of blockchain and walk you through everything you need to know to start identifying good use cases in the world around you and building compelling blockchain solutions.
With 60 days of access, a course study guide, an exam voucher all included, our on-demand package is all you need to get certified. Enroll today by visiting blockchaintrainingalliance.com.
Hi guys, it's Ken with the Blockchain Training Alliance, and I'm here to tell you about some major developments that we made in Hyperledger Fabric. We've written a lab guide that teaches you how to go from zero to hero using composer development. This teaches you how to write model files, create transaction processors, write permissions files, and also queries. We don't stop there. We teach you how to package up the business network and deploy it to a REST server. And then we teach you how to secure it using OAuth. And at the very end, we tell you to throw everything away, and we give you a capstone project on how to create a business network from scratch. So if you're interested, go ahead and click the button below.